I have been doing a life of Christ, looking at the Greek text with grammar as well as commentary. And we worked our way up to the section in which Jesus, there's three parables in which he defends his disciples for feasting instead of fasting. And we're at that point from the previous videos. So I'm on in Matthew chapter 9, verse 14 and following. Tata praser kantai auto hoi mathetai, Ioannou legantes, diate hemes kai hoi pharisaioi, nes stuamen pala, hoi de mathetaisu u ne usim. Then they are coming, that is, the disciples are coming to him, the disciples of John, saying, on account of why, or why are we and the Pharisees fasting often or frequently, and your disciples are not fasting? Notice here, then, after this interrogative pronoun and adjective, why, placer cantai, why are or the disciples, then the disciples are coming to him. Placer cantai is your present indicative middle third person plural from placer kamai, saying. Legantes is from lego. It's the participle, nominative masculine plural from lego. Diati, on account of why, or we could just translate it, why are we and the Pharisees nestuamen, fasting? Nestuamen is the present indicative active first person plural from nestuo, and pala means frequently or often. Why are the Pharisees fasting often, and your disciples are not fasting? Hoi de mathetaisu u nestu usin. Nestu usin again is from nestuo, present indicative active third person plural from nestuo. So the question that the disciples of John are asking the Lord is, why do we and the Pharisees at that time, why are we fasting frequently, but your disciples are not fasting? And I think the point here that Jesus is about to make is that he has something very different in his agenda than what the Pharisees and the disciples of John had. And so he's going to drive that point home. But this is the question. And so he responds in verse 15. And notice what he says. Kaye penaltois ha Jesus, me dunantai hoi huioi tu nymphonas penthein, F Hasan met auton estin ha nufias. Elusantai de chimerai chatan aparte ap auton ha nufias. That is, and Jesus said to them, the sons of the bridegroom, or we could say the followers of the bridegroom, are not able to sorrow as long as the bridegroom is with them. But days will come when the bridegroom would be taken away from them, and then they shall fast. Notice here Jesus' answer. He said to them, Apen is from Lego. It's the aorist indicative active third person singular from Lego. Jesus said to them that the sons of the bridegroom, we could render this like the followers of the bridegroom, Dunantai from Dunamai, are not able. Here we have the present middle indicative third person plural from Dunamai, are not able to sorrow. Fasting often goes with sorrow. Penthane. Here we have the infinitive from pentheo, the present active infinitive from pentheo. They're not able to sorrow as long as the bridegroom is with them. But days shall come. Notice elusantai is from erkamai. It's the future indicative middle, third person plural from erkamai. Days shall come when the bridegroom should be taken away from them. And the root here is apyro. It's the aorist subjunctive passive third person singular from apyro. So days will come when the bridegroom shall be taken away from them, and then they shall fast. Nestususin is the future indicative active third person plural from nestuo. Then they will fast. And I think the point that Jesus is making is when you had a wedding, you would often have a parade at that time. You would have, let's say, a week or so of ceremony, of partying. You would not have fasting. But I think, and those that would go to that would be the friends of the bridegroom. I believe Jesus is likening himself here to the bridegroom, and his disciples are the friends or the followers of the bridegroom. So as long as the bridegroom is with them, they're not going to be fasting. But days will come when the bridegroom would be taken away from them. And I think here we're looking at how Jesus is somewhat predicting, I think we could say, his final crucifixion and all that would happen when he would be taken away from them. Now they're rejoicing. So he uses that parable to teach the difference. But then he uses two other parables. Notice verse 16. Udes de epibale epiblema krakus afnafu epichematiu palio. Aire gar ta pleroma autu apa tu chematiu kai kairan schisma genetai. No one is sewing or putting upon, and here I think we would need to render this sewing. No one is sewing a piece of cloth that is shrunken, a piece of, let's say, a piece of unshrunken, like cloth upon an old garment, for that the fullness of it is taking away from the garment, and a worse tear occurs or happens. Notice epibale is from epibalo, to cast or to put upon. I think here we would render this so. It's the present indicative active third person singular from epibalo. So no one is sewing a piece of cloth. Notice epiblema, piece, krakus, a piece of, we could render this cloth that is unshrunken, or we could say of unshrunken cloth, agnafu, upon uh, an old garment. In other words, you don't take a brand new piece of unshrunken cloth and try to put it on an old garment. What happens, what it takes away, that is the fullness, its fullness takes away from the garment, pulls away, and there is a worse tear that occurs. This is from, by the way, Genomai. Um, it's the present indicative middle third person singular from Genomai. So you don't take a new piece, unshrunken cloth, and sew it on an old garment. Otherwise, it is the fullness of that is taking away from the garment, and a worse tear occurs. I think in the context here, Jesus is saying, I have not come to put something that I'm teaching, my program, into the old. In other words, he's doing something different from the Pharisees and what they had taught. He has something completely new. And so it won't fit to try to put it back in an unshrunken cloth into an old garment. So he will not be taking what he is teaching and trying to put it back in to Pharisaism at that time. And then he drives home the point again by a second parable in verse 17. Ude balusin oinan ne'an es askus palaius. Neither are they putting new wine into old wine skins. Ede mege regnuntai hoi askoi, kai ha oinas eketai kai hoi askoi apaluntai. That is, and if if that happens, will not the old wineskin, will not the wineskins, are they not being torn? By the way, regnuntai is from regnumi. It's the present indicative passive, third person plural from regnumi. Are they not being torn? And the wineskin, or the wine, that is, the skins are being torn because the new wine causes that to happen. And the wine, eketai, is being poured out. Eketai is from ekeo, to pour out. It's the present indicative passive, third person singular from ekeo. So the wine is being poured out, and the wine skins, apaluntai, are perishing. From apalumi, it is again the present indicative passive, third person plural from apalumi. So the wineskins are perishing, but notice balusin oinan ne'an es askus kainus kai amphateroi sun teruntai. But they are putting new wine into new wineskins, or new skins, wineskins, and both are being kept. Notice here, but they are putting, from balo, present indicative active, third person plural from balo, they are putting new wine into new wineskins, and both sun teruntai are being kept, from sun tereo. This is the present indicative passive third person plural from sun tereo. So what I understand Jesus to be teaching here, as recorded by Matthew, is that just like you don't take an unshrunken piece of cloth and put it on an old garment, or there'll be a tear. In the same sense, you don't take the new wine and put it into old wineskins. Because if you do that, again, it will tear apart. And what will happen, the wine will be poured out. You'll lose it. But they are putting they are, and what happens then, the wine perishes, but they are putting new wine into new wineskin, and both are being preserved. So I think what Jesus is saying is that his teaching and what he's communicating by his teaching and by his work in the kingdom of heaven, that this will not fit into the old system. And hence, what he's doing is completely different from what had been done in the system prior to this. A whole new thing. And so you don't take the new and put it into the old. So he's not just taking the old and putting it back in. He's taking the new, which represents his teaching and what he's about, and putting it into new wineskins. And as a result, both the wineskins and the wine will be preserved. So he's doing something completely different, I believe, from what had been done by, let's say, the Pharisees at this time. And I think that's what Matthew is driving home. That this is a whole new situation that we have in Christ that's totally different. And it's not going back and taking the old and putting it back into the old, or trying to take the new and putting it into the old. It won't work. It's a whole new thing that Jesus is doing. We see that in his teaching of the Sermon on the Mount. We see that in his ministry. We see that in that he has come to bring salvation by his death upon the cross to all who believe, by his glorious resurrection. And it's very different, even what was anticipated, which would have been this strong type of military deliverer in the Messiah. No, this is completely different. So he's not going back and putting what he is about into what had already been taught, believed, and practiced. It's brand new, totally different. I think that's my understanding of what Jesus is teaching. You don't take the new and try to put it into the old.